you have this failed fulfillment of the promise. Abraham keeps trying. Is this the fulfillment of the promise? Against or in conjunction with this practice in the Eastern Mediterranean and in Mesopotamia of child sacrifice. This was a thing that went on. It just took place. Just like you do with your firstborn animals, you gave it to God as if to say, I trust you to give me more of this. So here's my firstborn child. Please give me more children. We see it as insane, but in the ancient world, all the cultures of this world practiced this.
And the concept of and the purpose of the sacrifice of the firstborn is something that, if you're thinking through, well, I've heard some biblical texts and there are all these condemnations where you shouldn't do this and these bad kings pass the children through the fire. And the Bible is very anti-child sacrifice. The Bible is very anti-child sacrifice. That would never happen here. Unless we look at some other passages, like maybe in Exodus or in Numbers. Exodus 13, 1-2, the Lord said to Moses, consecrate to me all the firstborn, whatever is the first to open the womb among the Israelites of human beings and animals is mine. Exodus 22, 29-30, don't hold back your offerings. You must give me the firstborn of your sons. Do the same with your cattle and your sheep. Let them stay with their mothers for 7 days, but give them to me on the 8th day. Now, Exodus 34 does do that apologetic of, oh, you're supposed to redeem these. But we do have texts in the Bible that preserve this tradition of the firstborn of humans and animals are to be sacrificed. And if we're in the context of Abraham and Sarah looking around for a descendant, Ishmael doesn't count. Genesis 21, we get Isaac on the stage. Are they still unsure of how this covenant is going to be fulfilled? And maybe we're pre-Exodus if we're taking the biblical timeline. But if they're in a world that assumes child sacrifice of the firstborn, maybe Genesis 22 and the call to sacrifice the firstborn sounds like just another part of this covenant fulfillment confusion.
Or it's consistent with the practice that is going on, right? So first of all, let's address the commands to offer the firstborn, right? So a lot of apologists will say, well, look, there are these commands to offer up the firstborn, including the humans. It clearly says human beings and animals, right? That's Exodus 13, 1-2 clearly spell that out, right? You must give me the firstborn of your sons. Don't hold back, Exodus 22. It clearly says you've got to give God your firstborn sons, your children, right? And then later on, after the fact, remember, this stuff was redacted and written down after the exile, after they had banned child sacrifice, after they had stopped that practice. They went in and said, but you will redeem your firstborn children, and you will redeem it with a lamb or, with an animal, essentially. Apologists tend to harmonize those later verses with all of these earlier verses. So even the verses that don't say you will redeem your firstborn sons, they say, okay, but that's what they meant. They're supposed to redeem. They knew to redeem it. And of course, post-exile, after they had these later verses, that's how they interpreted those earlier verses. Well, yeah, of course we're going to redeem all their children. But the fact that you have these early commands that say, no, you're going to give me your that was the practice. And we know there was an article that came out in January about how the Carthaginians were doing child sacrifice. This is what you did. You would sacrifice your firstborn sons. And part of this, the rationale is infant mortality was so high. We can understand how the practice of infant sacrifice in a world where infant mortality was such a high rate, and men in a patriarchal society had multiple wives and concubines, and they were just trying to have as many children as they could. They would take their firstborn and say, I'm going to sacrifice this to the God that I worship. in the expectation that my 12 wives and my 20 concubines would produce more children, with the expectation that the infant mortality rate's 50, 60%, right? Most of them aren't going to survive anyway, and hopefully the God will shine down upon me, will bless me with lots of children. That was the practice.